Shalom. Welcome to Nazarene Israel. My name is Norman Willis, and this is our Genesis 35 Midrash for Parasha Tzav. And before we begin, we have one important administrative announcement and also one very important micro teaching a little bit later. My goal in all of this, like always, is to speak the truth in love, like Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 15 requires us, because speaking the truth in love is one of the foundations for building a unified family. First, in the stick of Ephraim, the stick of Joseph, which is in the hand of Ephraim. And second, for bringing both houses together in love, because after all, we are brothers. So please forgive my autistic directness, but with death curses hanging over our heads, we don't have time to waste anyway. So even if there wasn't a death curse, we don't have time to waste in serving our Elohim. So the administrative announcement is that a few months ago, we started to get into some, shall we say, honest and serious critiques of the doctrines and activities of our brothers, Levi and Judah. We started discussing these in the parashot because if the parasha is going to get dropped back in my lap and I can't work on the documentaries like I want to, then we're going to do a real parasha, but we're going to spend more time on the documentaries anyway. So the daily death curse, or the Birchat Haminim, you can read all about it in Wikipedia. I can understand it's a very aggravating issue for a lot of people. But the problem is we had such an undisciplined uproar coming from the house of Ephraim that we really had to address it. It wasn't brotherly, it wasn't loving, it wasn't professional, it was nothing. So I think what we had realistically was a bunch of Ephraimites thinking that the comments section was going to turn into a free-for-all dog pile on the house of Judah. Again, we can understand that with multiple unaddressed murders and a continuing daily death curse that prays for the death of the rest of us, that's been in effect for almost 2,000 years now, and is still in effect over the house of Joseph, even though they've known for at least the last 200 years who Joseph is. So we still have, even though Judah knows who we are, there is a Talmudic plan. We're working on a documentary, got to get more time for that. There's a Talmudic plan to slaughter the house of Ephraim, so we can understand that people can have some hard feelings. The problem is, brothers, just because someone is doing evil to you, that is no reason that you get to behave like an animal in return. Elohim will deal with the situation. He knows what's going on with the two houses. But so, we had to say something because basically two wrongs don't make a right. And we want to be open, or we want the comment section to be open to anyone who wants to invite in the set apart spirit. We want to make a positive, encouraging, loving presentation. And we really don't care about genetics. That's not our big thing. Our big thing is, how is your faith walk? Do you walk your talk? Do you walk his talk? And we don't care whether you're starting from Judah or Joseph or Ishmael or Esav even. We don't care, or even outside the family. We don't really care what your genetic makeup is. That's not important to us. We hope to meet you from every family, every nation, and every clan. But here, obviously, we have very limited time, very limited. There's a mountain of work that needs to get cast into the sea, and we only have our little wheelbarrows and shovels. So we're working away as faithfully as we can, because we want to see the stick of Ephraim, or the stick of Joseph, which is in the hand of Ephraim, become a reality. It's written there in prophecy. Why not? Let's work together like Yeshua asks us to do, to make it a reality. And those are the things that are going to matter to us. Those are the things that are going to witness for us in our favor on the day of judgment. It will be recorded in the books that we actually did what he said to do. That's what makes for surviving the tribulation. So people, people like their ears tickled. We're not about tickling ears. Yeah, so we had about 40% of our viewers stop following us. And I don't know why, because maybe because they wanted to dogpile on Judah, but we just don't think that's loving and we don't think that's brotherly. So just because someone wants to murder you and they pray for your death 18 times a week for almost the past 2,000 years, or at least since the last 200 years, because they know who we are, that's not a reason for the house of Ephraim and those of Judah who sojourn with us. That's not a reason for us to lower ourselves to that level, okay? Because there's always evil doers, and evil comes forth from the hand of the evil doers. And there's always Torah replacers. Sin crouches by the door, but it's our job to rule over it. So those who are attempting to replace Yahweh's word, whether they admit it or not, they will get theirs because Yahweh will make sure that they get theirs. You can rest assured they will get theirs because Elohim makes sure that time wounds all heals. So whether you call yourself Messianic or Hebrew roots or Ephraimite or whatever, you know, sorry, we have to limit ourselves to the disciples because we don't even have enough time for that. So I know that doesn't sound nice. I know a lot of people would like to have more, but this is what we can do at this point in time. So please pray that Yahweh will send more workers out into his harvest because we certainly need that. Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 15 requires all of us to speak the truth in love, just like Yeshua did. Be direct, but loving, so that we can all grow up to become like him, because that is how we are supposed to unify his body worldwide. And that's no matter what race, no matter what background, no matter what anything like that. So we'll have to deal with Levi's doctrinal pride in future videos because most of the tribal identities are going to be reassigned in the end time in gathering anyway. We know that there will be at least a formed tribe of Judah and a formed tribe of Levi. And we don't have time to unpack all of this here. It gets complicated. But for the rest of us, in Ezekiel chapter 47 and 48, we're told that the tribal allotments are going to be reassigned basically depending upon where we settle. For example, in Ezekiel chapter 47, starting in verse 22, it says that we shall divide the expanded millennial land as an inheritance for ourselves and for the strangers who dwell among us. That's Ephraim. That's the sons of Joseph, and who bear children among us. Why? Because they're grafting back in. That's what they want. We want to come home. We want to come home according to the prophecies in the Tanakh. It says right here in Ezekiel, it says, and they shall be born to us as native born among the children of Israel. We don't see Noahides mentioned. We don't see anything like that. And they shall have an inheritance with us among the tribes of Israel. So we see all of the tribes listed there in Ezekiel. So why, anyway, Judah's got a different program going on in the Talmud, but it says, and it shall be that in whatever tribe the stranger dwells, there you shall give him his inheritance, says Yahweh Elohim, because that's where he's grafting in. So this gets complicated and we'll have to unpack it later. And brothers Judah and Levi both definitely have important roles to play, but they have come up with this other program. It's this giant Talmudic split level sandcastles in their heads about what's going to happen during the millennium with so-called Noahides and all kinds of things for which we can't find any correspondence at all to the prophecies in the Tanakh. The Tanakh says this, the Talmud says that, and they point in completely opposite directions. So, we don't know a nicer way to say it. It's as if they seem to think that their corruption of Yahweh's word is going to stand rather than the word of Yahweh. They want to set up shop on the sides of the north, so to speak. And the thing is, there will be a reward for those who stick with Yahweh Elohim. Yeah, we are not free to rewrite his laws. So, we're going to have to unpack this in some other place, but the rabbis are not teaching the truth. The rabbis are not teaching what the Tanakh says to do. They're teaching the opposite of what the Tanakh says to do. That's why they teach their people not to read it, or if they do read it, not to interpret it for themselves. Sounds like the Catholic Church. So, uh, brothers, the main thing that people always seem to forget, we're always forgetting, what does Yahweh want? If we're not going to think about what Yahweh wants, what are we doing? We're his servants. We don't care about what he wants as expressed in his word. Oh, we've never read his word. Oh, we don't know what he says. We know what men say. We know what our opinion is. We know what we'd like to believe. Is that the same as what Elohim says to do? And I guess I have to, forgive me. I did. Well, I was enrolled for a PhD program in psychology when Yahweh called me, and I realized that wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to follow the Spirit. Found out later his name was Yahweh. So, what the Spirit, Yahweh, Elohim, Tsevaot, has always wanted, he's always wanted a single family of man that works together to establish his truth in all the earth. Again, because we fell, there's a multi-step, multi-stage plan. But if we ever forget that end goal, we start doing things we think would be good for us. What are we doing, brothers? Are we serving Yahweh Elohim if we're not doing eagerly the things that he says to do? Is that love for him? To read what he says, or to not read what he says, to be willfully ignorant of what he says? Um, what Yahweh wants is a single family of man who loves one another, takes care of one another and his planet and his creation. And now we have to go the long way around. So we'll talk about that in future parashiot. Abraham Accords, 4 horses. But he wants a single family that takes care of his planet, takes care of the family as a 5-fold family on a single doctrine, which is his, because we're listening to his voice. That's why we follow his doctrine. So I know that as an autistic person, I can sometimes seem a little direct. The head injury didn't help. So I know I can sometimes, people wonder where I'm coming from. But the thing is, I have a productive point where I don't open my mouth. So, so people hearing what is being said, I would challenge you to own it. Either prove it or disprove it for yourself. And if there's something truly wrong, let us know, because I'm not interested in being right. I'm interested in being used of him to speak that which is right, which is that which is in his word, and to get his people to give him his due. So I don't know if people really take the time to sit down and think about what, first, to read Yahweh's word deeply, to know the heart and the mind of Yahweh, and then to say, what does he want here? We'll talk about what he wants here in the documentary series in the parashiot. And it's tremendously sad for me. So many prayers, so many concerns, so many heavy burdens for our people. Verses like Yeshayahu, or Isaiah chapter 10 and verse 22 tell us that 90% of us are going to die basically for a lack of discipline, meaning we don't bear good fruit. And every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. And so when we saw the majority, well, not the majority, but we saw a lot of comments where people just seemed to think it was a free for all on Brother Judah. It's like, is anybody even thinking here about what Elohim wants in this whole thing? Is anyone in Judah's house of Judah that's cursing Joseph 3 times a weekday thinking about what Elohim wants here? Breaking Genesis 12 and verse 3. Is anyone on the Ephraimite side who's not building a house for Yeshua, not building the stick of Ephraim, not helping spread the good news in a coordinated and organized way? How can we say we love Elohim when we're not willing to do the things that Elohim says? I can't understand it. And I have such a burden on my heart for the house of Ephraim and for Judah. Yeah. So I don't know, but just to clean up our own house first, I just haven't seen anything that even approaches the level of discipline that Brother Judah shows. And what fruits we do have, their theology is just stinky. I don't know a better word than stinky. So, and the problem is that most of Ephraim seems to think he's just really knocking it out, when the fact is he's supposed to be doing what he's reading. And he's not doing what he's reading. He's reading and he's assuming reading is doing, or we just don't read that part, or we just ignore that requirement. It's the great omission. So the problem, brothers, to speak the truth in love, trying to save someone's life here, is there's only so much spiritual drunkenness and stupor and stupidity that Elohim's going to put up with. And we're going to talk about Ephraim and the drunkards of Ephraim and the split level heads of Ephraim in some more detail this week. Of course, we also have words for brothers Levi and Judah. But it seems important to us, to continue the administrative announcement, it seems important for Ephraim first to clean up his own house before thinking about going to lecture Judah and Levi. And Judah and Levi, they will need to take their lumps also, okay? But it's not the case that the southern house is the only one in the wrong today. Okay, that's called hypocrisy. That's called overbearing pride. You know, the worst fault is to think you have none. In other words, don't scrutinize yourself. Don't take the log out of your own eye first. Don't clean up your own room first. Don't clean up your own backyard first. So we are, to be clear, just to clarify, we are planning to fully critique brothers Judah and Levi for the wrong that they are doing in the documentary series. However, we need everyone in the house of Ephraim, please, to take the trees or the forest out of their own eyes first. Then we can see clearly to help brothers Judah and Levi take the forest out of their eyes so they can actually go back to the Tanakh and start doing what they're reading too. Right now, they're not even reading the book. We're reading the book. We're just not doing anything. Okay, so uh, I learn stuff about myself all the time. Every year, I look back and go, "Oof, wow, I'm still learning." Praise Yah. Okay, but we have to take a humble approach. Okay, we have to put ourselves under the microscope. We have to keep one eye on our own monitor, so to speak. We have to listen to the words that come out of our own mouth. We get attacks here, email attacks, these kinds of things. We just delete them. We don't have time. It's not that we don't want to talk with you. We just don't have time. Okay. Problem is, to speak the truth in love, Ephraim seems to think that being called is the same as being chosen. Okay, Ephraim seems to think just because we receive the invitation, okay, the son Elohim sent his son to come bring us an invitation, personalized invitation, and we think that we don't have to respond to everything in the instruction book. We're still going to get a pass. Okay, so what we're really saying here is the pride is out of control in both houses, brothers. It just manifests differently. Judah has the shock troops role, so to speak, in taking back the land. And as we talked about before, they're going to get pounded for it, is what the Tanakh says. Maybe that's why they don't read the Tanakh, because they don't want to know what's coming. I don't know. I have a burden. I pray for Judah that they will wake up. Uh, in contrast, Ephraim has been given the purity role because purity wasn't the attributes of our forefather Joseph. The problem is, if we're not willing to live up to our calling, okay, we're called, we know we're called, but are we living up to our calling? That's how you get chosen. Okay. So if we're not willing to live up to the legacy of our forefather Joseph, then why does Elohim want us? If the salt loses its savor, it's good for nothing but the trash heap. So, Ephraim, we're reading all the right books. We just need to wake up and realize that they apply to us. We need to close what's called the knowing doing gap. That's a field. And here's what you know, here's what you do. Big gaps for a lot of people. Ephraim needs to close the knowing doing gap. So we're not thinking one thing and doing another, living in a split level mind. So again, thank you very much for those of you who are praying for this ministry, who are supporting this ministry, who are helping this word to go forth. It is very much appreciated, and our prayers are for you. We just don't have time for arguments. So people who send email arguments or email attacks or in the comments, we just don't have time. So war is coming. So we'll talk more about that in future parashiot. I don't know, when you run through scripture, they used to have the Georgia Guidestones with a 95% death rate predicted. That's been destroyed now, but it's still recorded all over the internet. And Yahweh tells us in Yeshayahu or Isaiah chapter 10 and 22 that he has a 90% death and rejection rate coming for the house of Ephraim. And so what does that mean? It means is he doesn't have time for foolishness. He doesn't have time for people who claim that they read his word, they claim that they serve him, and then they don't. So we need to remember that Yahweh has his watchers, and they are watching and recording everything that we do and don't do. They're taking notes. These notes will be read. The books will be opened in the day of the judgment. That's where these books come from. The watchers are writing them now. They're writing these books. Are we helping Yeshua build the kingdom that his father sent him to build, to get us to build in his absence? Okay, before we get into that in the Brit Chadasha section, first let's talk a micro teaching on the Genesis 35 alliance. So this is something I thought people, they don't understand what's the emphasis on Genesis 35 and what is the extent, what is the depth, what are we really talking about here? Bereshit, or Genesis chapter 35 and verse 11, speaks of what shall we call it? It's a secret sod level alliance hidden in plain sight. It's right there. Everyone reads it once a year in the Parasha readings at least. So in the future, if we can look, if we know what the telltale signs are, we should be able to, in the future, see a much more visible connection. Now, this will be after the house of Ephraim decides to form the stick of Joseph in the hand of Ephraim. But Manasseh is still going to be out there in the dispersion after the ingathering, after Armageddon. So, but for right now, for example, on the southern side, the Southerners, you have the house of Judah, the tribes of Judah, Levi, and Benjamin. And effectively, they are in the lead of the war strategy. So we fell, we didn't want to obey. We talk about that, we didn't want to just hear his voice and do what he said. So again, we're going to go around the hard way, the long way. Judah's telling himself he's right on track. Judah's telling himself everything's going to go smooth. He's replacing Yahweh's word with his own words, and everything's going to be just fine. A lot of prayers, a lot of prayers for brother Judah. So what we know in the house of Ephraim is that Daniel chapter 9 and verse 26 tells us that there was a great sacrifice of Mashiach Nagid, who came exactly right on time. Mashiach the teller, Mashiach the director, one like Moses. And he was cut off. Mashiach Nagid was cut off just before the destruction of the second temple, but not for himself, as Daniel 9 and verse 26 says. So let's take a look at the relationships here, if we can just sort of see things with spiritual eyes. So here we have a news article was praying about what to include, how to illustrate this, saying that the southern house of Judah has declared that its allies in the Genesis 35 alliance, namely the United States, the United Kingdom, and France, will help lead the attack if there's any agitation from the house of Ishmael in Iran. If Iran should strike the house of Judah in Israel, Joseph is coming to the fight. That's the Genesis 35 alliance. So, and there's still a relationship, even though neither house is truly walking clean right now, at least not in the main. But yet, doesn't there still seem to be an intent to at least give the nod to the word of Elohim? Even if we're not going to do what it says, we're still giving the nod to Elohim. Okay, well, that's better than not giving the nod to Elohim in his book. So the problem is, again, it's like coming from the land of Egypt to the land of Israel. We can do it his way and we can make the walk in 2-3 weeks. Everything's good. Or we can not listen to him. We can not do things his way. And now we have a whole lot of trouble. We have a whole lot of problem for ourselves, self-inflicted wounds. That's what we're talking about here. Ever since the Garden of Eden, self-inflicted wounds. So, Elohim is Elohim. This is, I think people don't get it. Like they oh, yeah. They give the nod to Elohim, but they don't really get it. They're not integrated. You know what I'm saying? We talk about on the website, we have an article about double-mindedness and how it relates to schizophrenia. So today they call it schizophrenia. Back in the first century, they called it double-mindedness. So that's a good article. Just type double-mindedness into the search bar, or you could type in schizophrenia. That should pull it up also. A good search bar. Praise Yahweh for Moises' help. But what he wants is a single family of man working together to take care of his planet the way he says, the way he wants, listening to his voice, loving him first and foremost, and then loving each other as much as we love him, loving each other as we love ourselves, because we're diligently listening for his voice and we're reading what he said. And so then we're taking it upon ourselves to diligently organize ourselves to do the things our King wants us to do for him the very best that we can. So it's right there in the book. We just have to take the time to read it through and say, am I doing this? Am I doing that? Are we as a people doing this? Are we as a people doing that? Because it's not a spectator sport. It's a team participant sport and it's pay to play. So I was praying about how to reach Ephraim, how to reach Judah, so I can. This is the burden on my heart, and I want 100% of them. I know we're only going to get 10% of Ephraim. So please forgive me for speaking the truth in love. But from my point of view, both Judah and Joseph are being completely double-minded on this, completely schizophrenic on this. They're living in a split level head. They're not integrated. There's a knowing doing gap. There's a difference between what they know intellectually and what they actually do. That's not good. So, if we're going to claim to belong to Elohim, if we're going to claim to be his servants, we need to be eager to follow his rules. It's a big bad world out there as a sheep. If you're a sheep, you need a shepherd. You need a real shepherd with some real power and a long staff, can whack the wolf. He knows how to deliver his sheep from the mouth of the bear. So, but if we want to be his servants, if we want to be good servants, don't we need to learn about his rules and then obey his rules and not replace them with traditions and teachings of our own? But take a look at this article. So here we have, if you know anything about Babylonian democracy and how they supply both sides of the equation, we have the former US President Trump, and he's campaigning. And then I guess I don't really follow the news at that level, but the former, Vice President Harris is ahead of President Trump in the polls, at least with the Jewish people. So here you could say that President Trump is effectively promising to put the United States in the hip pocket of Judah. So you can look at this in a number of ways. You can look at it as a conspiracy, or you can just look at it like scripture playing out. You could say, look, it's Judah leading Joseph, just like in the Genesis 35 and verse 11 alliance. And here you have the brother Joseph, younger brother Joseph, pledging support and loyalty to Judah, because that's really what's going on here. So just like you have the special relationship between the UK, England, and the United States, that's the special relationship of Manasseh, the older brother, with Ephraim, the younger brother. So now the special relationship between Ephraim and Judah is just exactly that. And Manasseh has forgotten his home and his father's house. So that's why there's antipathy, shall we say. Manasseh sort of still leaning a little bit towards Esau's attitudes. He insists on his own self-determination, but he holds the same attitudes. We'll talk about that some other place and time. So as far as Ishmael, so what we have to do in order, we have to form the stick of Joseph so we can be unified with brother Judah. We can form the Jewish millennial reign. We're talking 30, 40, 50 years. We'll talk about that at other places. So what we do then, once we have the Jewish millennial reign established in the land of Israel, that's when we can begin extending the olive branch to cousin Ishmael and all other peoples throughout the millennium at that time. So the qualification will be, it will be open to anyone who wants to accept and live by and abide by the principles and precepts and the commandments given by Elohim in the Torah Moshe, the Torah of Musa. There won't be Talmud. The Talmud reads quite differently than the Tanakh. So I'm encouraging my contacts in the land of Israel all the time, go back to the Tanakh, because that's what they need to do, at least if they want to survive what's coming. How else can you say it? You want to give a happy, encouraging parasha, but if people don't go back, if people don't start giving their loyalties back to Yahweh Elohim, how can we expect to survive what's coming? That doesn't even make sense. Do we understand the concept of an all-powerful Elohim and the transgression of his law, especially when we can read it right there in the text? The penalty is death. So what we're going to see is that the floggings continue until morale improves. Elohim says right there in his word, he's going to pound. He's so sick and so tired of our disobedience going all the way back to Egypt. So that was the last operation that went right, was he sprung us from Egypt, and it's been continuous failures on our part ever since. So what he says is, it's boot camp. You got to make it or you're not going to make it. So Elohim plans, like a good commander, he's going to pound both Judah and Joseph until he gets what he wants. So what does he want? It's the same thing as what he's always wanted. Say it again and again. He wants a single family of man that submits first to his spirit and then to his laws, so that together we can establish a single family of man from the loins of our forefather Abraham, and also open to those who are not of the family of Abraham, that they also have a place. Esau just needs to defect. He needs to give that up. Secularism, that's not pleasing to Elohim. Or secularism disguised as the religion of Yeshua. That's the broadest, easiest road of all. So, but this is what Elohim wants, is he wants to use the sacrifice of his son and the ministry of his son to preach the good news of salvation, the good news of the kingdom to all of the tribes of the earth, every language, every nation. Ishmael is definitely invited if you want to play by the same rules as we do, by the written Torah of Moshe. So you can absolutely graft in. That is Elohim's plan. We also obey the words of Mashiach Nagid, because he's prophesied right there in Daniel 9 and verse 26. He came right on time to the year. So we know that cousin Ishmael does keep certain principles and precepts of the Torah that neither Judah nor Joseph practice right now. We'll talk a lot more about that when we get to the Abraham Accords series. But just to reiterate, the Genesis 35 alliance that you see today is not the same way the Genesis 35 alliance is supposed to operate during the millennium. Okay, during the millennium, Manasseh has a big role. We'll talk about that in the future. But the problem we need to focus on right now. People ask me all kinds of questions. Norman, what happens in in the time between we die and the resurrection? I don't know. I've never studied into it because it doesn't pertain to right now. What I'm interested in is helping get people saved, and I mean in an abiding relationship in the vine, so they're not cut off. I'm interested in getting. I've met a lot of Ephraimite atheists from my point of view. And I'm interested in getting people saved. I'm interested in getting people in relationship with the vine, getting plugged in and connected, listening, a life giving relationship all the time. So, and that applies to both houses of Judah and Joseph. So, we'll talk more about in the Revelation timeline. I've never had, well, hopefully explain in the future. There's various levels that we're preaching to here. So, but at all various different levels, both the houses of Judah and Joseph, they are supposed to work together. So we're talking about the black horse and the white horse. One of the things about Ephraim is he doesn't understand the concept of a kingdom. Judah understands the concept of a kingdom. He's got the wrong idea of what the kingdom should be like, but at least he's energetic in performing it. Ephraim has still not the right idea of what the kingdom is supposed to be like because many of the Ephraimites I've met, they want to stay out in the dispersion. That's why the plagues are coming on Yahweh's people, Ephraim, because land of the United States of America is not the promised land. People need to let go of the idea of the US of A as an ideal. It's not the ideal. So we need to go back to the land of Israel. So we need to pray that Yahweh's people will want to leave the land of the United States, so they'll want to go back home to the land of Israel. I'm not just talking about our immediate community, I'm talking about the whole house of Ephraim. Not just, well, the prophetic tribe of Ephraim in the United States, but also the whole house of Ephraim. Okay, now we talk about that in our Midrash on Parasha Miketz from 5784. We talked about how Judah impregnated his daughter-in-law Tamar, and this then gave rise to the line of Zerah, or the hidden seed line, where Judah goes undercover to become the Dunmei. He goes undercover to become the Jesuits. He also starts the Illuminati seed line that controls the Masonic Lodge and all that whole thing. The physical world, the temporal world that got started around 1666 by the Red Shield family and the 13 inner city of London families. I don't know all the details, but let me give a quick plug again for a book by Robert Sepper. Especially if you're Jewish, you need to read this book, 1666 Redemption Through Sin. It's a great little book. It's, I believe, like 76 pages, something. It just reads like a pearl. It's just smooth as it can be. I just reads right through. It explains basically the last 350 years of deviation from the Torah in 76 pages. So it is definitely a record of what we are not supposed to do. And as we're going to see in the next 30 or 40, 50 years, if we are not doing what Elohim says to do, it's going to be lights out and into the outer darkness we go. And I think one of the things our people always fail to remember is that when we left Egypt, yeah, it added an additional 40 years, but our children went into the land. Now, what's different is this time our children won't go into the land. So each one will be punished for his own sin, but sins tend to run in families, tend to be sins of omission in families. So, children, if you see your parents doing wrong, let them know. If you see them doing, if there's a discrepancy, if there's a hypocrisy between what they say and what they do, let them know in love. respectfully, but let them know. If you love them, help wake them up so they can survive what's coming. But this Bereshit or Genesis 35 alliance is extremely powerful because it's right there in the opening book. And it's right there. It's a promise that this is what is going to happen with Israel's seed. He's going to have a nation at the core and then a company of Ephraimite Christian nations. So, and if we're talking about the political dynamics generated by the mere existence of this planned Genesis 35 alliance, we call level 2, first let's recognize who the real players are. And now we already talked about this in our study on Revelation in the End Times, or Revelation Simplified on YouTube. Again, the YouTube version has a little bit more data. We don't have time to unpack everything here. I want to do something 3, 4, 5 times that involves much better presentation. We just need to get time. We don't have time to unpack the whole thing here, but in Zechariah chapter 6, we're going to see 4 horses, and they represent 4 different aspects of the kingdom. They're four horse forces, so to speak, and they're supposed to be in a certain order, but everything's out of order, and now everything's all messed up. So what we're going to see in a world where everything's all messed up, these are 4 horse forces or 4 horse main powers that are presently each vying for kingship and leadership of the world, except for Ephraim, because he's not doing much of anything. But the joke is on everyone, because what's supposed to be happening is all 4 of these horse force kingship drivers, these main movers and shakers, they're supposed to be working. We are all supposed to be working together for Yeshua to build his Jewish millennial reign. Okay, so before Mashiach Nagid returns on his white horse to unify mankind, okay, before Mashiach arrives to straighten everything out, put the horse forces back in order, you've got the 4 horse forces right now fighting each other. And we come to Zechariah 6 and verse 2. We see that with the first chariot, there are red horses. Red is Esau's color. Esau's mad. He's mad at Jacob or Israel, and he wants to kill him. So hence he wants to kill Jacob's sons, Judah and Joseph. And the horse is red because secular humanists typically focus on the commonality we have of red blood, especially maternal blood or even paternal blood. But they focus on the fact that everyone's blood is red. So what can we say here? What we say is that Esau basically focuses on the fact that we have common heritage, but the problem is Esau is focused on the flesh. There's nothing transcendent about Esau's approach. There's nothing that goes to the other side about Esau's approach. Okay, so we talk about Esau's spirituality in other places. He just basically tries to sanctify living your life in the world in Yeshua's name. A lot of Ephraim does that also. Uh, you know, what shall we say? Judah and Levi, they have their extra biblical B'nai Noach program. They have their extra biblical curse over Judah and Joseph. Well, so one of the things Judah is very smart about, Judah figures that if Esau's trying to kill him as one of the sons of Jacob, he might as well learn how to control him. Okay, well, public opinion can be easily influenced with money. Money talks, money buys influence, and people can be groomed. Zechariah 6 and verse 2, we also see the black horse, which is the black ops horse, Judah. When we talk about black ops, we're talking especially about Judah and Tamar's incestuous offspring, child Zerah. And in that light, we can think about the Mossad, we can think about other secretive agencies, the Illuminati, and then their pawns, the Masonic Lodge. And they follow basically right behind the red horse. That's because they're controlling the red horse, because luminous Judah has money, and with money, you can control public opinion. Money buys advertising, money buys influence, money talks, and grooming works. So if money buys grooming, then money buys changes in public opinion. That is, at least for those who are plugged into the mainstream. And pretty much everyone but White Horse Ephraim is plugged into the mainstream. So Black Horse, Judah, and Levi are powerful, and people will get upset with me for saying this, but they're powerful not only because of things like Jekyll Island and the things that are described in the 1666 Redemption Through Sin book. Yes, they're powerful because of those kinds of things. They're a kingship tribe, but they're powerful not only because of those kinds of things. Their people also make them powerful. Black Ops Judah also studies. They have something like 40 times more Nobel Prizes than any other people per capita in the world. So they have a culture of reading Yahweh's word, studying Yahweh's word. And so because of this studying, well, and also rather, they're studying the Talmud. They should be studying Yahweh's word. They're studying their own words in the Talmud. But so because they have this culture of studying, they also have doctors, lawyers, business leaders. They have many people in science, in the arts, and in media, in all different levels of government. So, for many different reasons, the kingship tribe has money and influence. They lead businesses, they start businesses, the startup nation. So, while Judah is not always able to control Esav, with technology at least, they're able to seriously influence Esav, if not groom him. Why? Is because Esav is more focused on his flesh than he is about Elohim. He'll give the nod to Elohim, join the club, right? So he'll give the nod to Elohim, but he won't actually do what Elohim says. Why? Is because there's no real faith there. It's more of a focus on the self and our life in the world in Yeshua's name or Jesus's name, as the case may be. So there you go. That's that relationship there. Then you have in Zechariah, you put red horse and black horse together, you get the Halloween horse. So then in Zechariah 6 and verse 3, we see that with the third chariot, there were white horses. And the white is symbolic of purity. And our forefather Joseph tried to walk in purity, even when those around him attempted to pull him down to their level. And that's a strong message for every son of the house of Joseph. So then in Hitgalut or Revelation or Sodot in the new version by HebrewGospels.com, but in Sodot or Revelation 19 and verse 11, we see that when Mashiach Nagid returns, he will be riding a white horse. And we don't have time to unpack it here, but when we get to the Four Horses series, we will see that it's a huge deal that the order of horses changes at the time Mashiach Nagid was cut off in Daniel 9 and verse 26. Basically, what happens is that the white horse, Ephraim, zooms to the head of the pack. And we don't have time to talk about that now, but we'll try to get into it when we get to the expanded Four Horses series. But then in Zechariah 6 and verse 3, we also see dappled horses. Now, the dappled horses represent Ishmael. And this is interesting. We don't have time to unpack it. But in the Greek versions, when you get to Revelation or Sodot or Hitgalut, the color of the horse turns gray in most versions. So it turns from dappled in Zechariah to gray in Revelation. But in the Greek, they use the word chloros as in chlorophyll, which is green. So in the Greek versions, the horse turns green. And as we unpack in the Revelation study, green is a very popular symbolic color for the house of Ishmael, for Islam. But what we need to see here, Ephraim needs to realize what's going on. Ephraim needs to realize and understand where he's at and what the requirements on him are, so that the 10% who believe Elohim and their actions match their words, okay, and they want to survive what's coming. Okay, then what we need to do, brothers, we need to organize together as a stick. We need to bring the horse together, so to speak. We need to materialize the white horse. It's a lot of diffuse action. What's required is coordinated action. Even if it's only 10% of us. They say it was 3% of the people who fought in the American Revolution. And then there were a third that were for, a third that were against, and a third that were neutral. The action of 3% of the people could bring about a huge change because Ephraim's a bunch of rebels. And if there's an opportunity to rebel, we'll figure out what we want to do later. But right now, we want to rebel. But here we have to rebel back to Elohim. It's a different kind of a thing. We have to choose to rebel against our own rebellion, so to speak. So we might become faithful servants to him. We need to operate, all of us. There's a job to do. We have to put together the stick of Ephraim, the stick of Joseph, which is in the house of Ephraim, according to fivefold principles. And that's the very first step so that the rest of the prophecies can carry out. So that's where our focus has to be for right now. So please forgive me. Some people write some very nice questions. But yeah, our focus in this ministry on this channel is what are we supposed to be doing right now to survive the next 30, 40, 50 years? When we get to the documentary series, we'll talk all about how the black horse and the white horse team up, as in the Genesis 35 alliance, to form kind of a zebra. So you have, or depending on how you structure, you've got a cloud of white horse nations surrounding a black horse nation. So we're also going to see how red horse Esav basically allows green horse Ishmael or dappled horse Ishmael to exploit him, and how that's going to cost Esav everything in the upcoming wars. So together we'll show how Esav and Ishmael represent what we call, jokingly, the peppermint horse. But what you have in the end times, basically, it's a lot more complicated than this. But what you have is the peppermint horse attacking the zebra. You have the peppermint horse on the zebra, on the black and white horse. So it gets more complicated than that, but that's basically the end time struggle. So we all know Christians and Jews are being brought together. We all know Judah wants to keep cursing us to death because they don't like prophets. They don't want to go back to the Tanakh. And as we saw in Parasha Vayeshev 5784, you also have black horse Judah and Levi on white horse Joseph. You have the older brothers, Judah and Levi, on Joseph, and now on Ephraim. And they never really liked Manasseh either. So Joseph has it the worst. Joseph gets hit from all sides, and it's only going to get worse. So the thing is, brothers, and I want to be positive and I want to be encouraging, but people need to realize what the stakes are. So I can encourage you to obey Elohim's word, not just to read it, or Judah to read it and then to obey it, and Joseph not just to read it, but also to do it, to take it on yourself, to apply it to you. And I can never understand, why would people follow ministries that don't look like the book of Acts? Does anyone have an explanation for that? Why have we created this entire completely other system? Oh, because it doesn't look exactly like Rome, we can still be disorganized. Because it doesn't look exactly like Rome, we don't have to obey. So here you have Ephraim still rebelling against Elohim and think he's stellar. So Yahweh sent his son, Yeshua HaMashiach, at the end of the Second Temple period, just like Daniel 9, verse 25 and verse 26 say, and he is Mashiach Nagid. He's Mashiach the teller, Mashiach the prince, and he wants to help us. But what king can rule without taxes? What king can rule without workers? Who can get anything done without someone walking things out, being the hands and feet? So he has a price for stepping in and helping us. And this is nothing that we wouldn't have had to do if we had stayed in the Garden of Eden. If we had stayed in the Garden of Eden, we would still need to organize ourselves in order to do his will. So now here we are in the dispersion. What does he want? He wants us to organize ourselves and tax ourselves so we can do his will. So in the American Revolution, the people decided they had to tax themselves in order to do what was necessary to break free from the Babylonian kingship of King George. So I'm not saying rebellion is right. Anyway, we'll talk about that in the Abraham Accord series. There's this whole series of events that has to play out. If you step things through logically, we'll talk all about it. But basically, what the problem we have now, brothers, is Ephraim is still pink horse. He's still tainted red. We've come out of Esau's house in Rome just a little more than 500 years ago in the Protestant Reformation, except we're still tainted red. We still have Esauvite thought patterns. We still make Esauvite type excuses. We still use Paul to explain away Yeshua. We use Yeshua to explain away Elohim, to Yahweh. We use Yeshua to explain away Tanakh. When he says right there, do not think that I came to abolish the bridal contract. Well, okay, so nothing is not perfect yet already, but so at least he's in process, Pilgrim's Progress. So at least Ephraim now he's reading the Bible for himself. So with Esau, for a while, you couldn't even read the Bible. It was only available in Latin. They would kill you if you tried to translate it into another language. So the common person could understand it. So this is one of the characteristics of Mystery Babylon. They teach the people an easier pathway, a broad, easy pathway that looks like the worship of Elohim if you don't look at it too hard. If you don't scrutinize it, you don't read and study and say, wait, am I doing what scripture says? I know mom and dad taught me, and I know I learned in church or synagogue or mosque. But have I ever sat down and read the words of Elohim for myself and decided, am I going to obey these? Am I going to commit to living what I'm reading? Am I going to commit to making it a reality because I know that Yeshua wants this? I know that Mashiach Nagid wants this. This is Mashiach Nagid's instructions. Right now, almost no one's obeying Mashiach Nagid's instructions. Eventually, 10% of us will decide in favor of Yahweh Elohim. We'll quit hopping between two opinions. We'll quit living in a split level head. Because like we saw in Isaiah 10 and verse 22, 90% of us are not going to make it. I want to encourage you in the strongest possible terms to realize you can't look to your left and right for the other guy to show you the way or for the other guy to agree with you, because 90% of us are not going to make it. So you're going to have to be serious and put Elohim first. You're going to have to put your connection to Yeshua first. Okay, but still in the Genesis 35 Alliance, basically you have the zebra team, the zebra alliance. You have Black Horse Judah. He has the scepter, he has the money, he has the control. You have Levi, he has the Levitical priesthood. And then on the other hand, in the other house, in the sons of the northern kingdom, you have, we'll talk about it later, but you have the tribe of Gad with the portion of the lawgiver, meaning the right to set the halakha for the nation. That's precious. We'll talk about that more in the Abraham Accords series. So what you have, your zebra, basically is also at another level, level 3, level 4, level 5, level 6 even. Your zebra is your military industrial complex. It is also your deep state. So Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah, chapter 51 and verse 20 tells us that Joseph's son Ephraim is Yahweh Tsevaot's battle axe and weapons of war. Okay, so there's your military part of the military industrial complex. We've already seen how brothers Levi and Judah study. True, they're studying all the wrong things. They're studying Talmud instead of Torah, saying it's Torah, just to confuse the issue for everyone. That's Babylon's confusion. But they're studying their own words and not Elohim's words. And they're lying about it being Torah, but at least they're studying, at least they're getting smart. So then what happens? You have spin-off doctors, lawyers, business leaders, government, media. So there's your industrial part of the military industrial complex, the Joseph Judah complex. So even in that sense, yeah, you've got your Genesis 35 and verse 11 alliance. So we take a look. That's why Judah likes to import Protestant weapons. That's why the United States sticks close to Israel and supports it, is because you have Ephraim, the sons of Joseph, attempting to save Judah's lives yet again, just like we saw in the book of Genesis, and also defending him against the peppermint horse. So there will have to be a point in time when Judah goes back to the Tanakh and gives up the daily death curse. We pray that that day can be sooner rather than later, because none of us have time to waste. So what we see here is a little micro lesson that the Genesis 35 and verse 11 alliance goes much deeper than most people suspect. For horses, we'll talk about that in more detail. Okay, now we're going to make a few quick pit stops here in the Torah portion before we move on to the Haftarah prophetic portion. So let's come to Vayikra, or Leviticus chapter 6, starting in verse 16. And it says that Aharon and his sons shall eat the sacrifices with unleavened bread in a set apart place. Verse 17 emphasizes that the sacrifices shall not be eaten with leavened bread. Now, we'll talk about this some other time in another place. There's an exception for Shavuot where we need specifically leavened loaves. But as we show in our studies about the Pesach or Passover, we're talking about the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Leaven symbolizes pride because pride, like leaven, puffs us up. So what do we do when we're puffed up? We figure we don't need to obey Yahweh Elohim. We can add and subtract to his word. We can make up our own doctrines. We can make commentaries on commentaries on commentaries on commentaries on commentaries on commentaries, and assume that those do away with the Tanakh. So what we'll see in other places is that the Feast of Unleavened Bread is really supposed to be the Feast of Unaltered Doctrine, the Feast of the written Torah of Moshe, the feast of doing what Elohim said instead of doing what we would like to do, whatever seems good and right in our own eyes, as codified in Babylonian Talmud tractate and as codified in Ephraimite Sofa tractate, Sofa rumor mill. Okay, right here in this passage, the symbolism in verse 17 is that if you can't in truth live a life of sacrifice for him, you're making up your own doctrine. We're supposed to we are his servants. We have to give up our own lives in order to do what he wants us to do instead. And that's even if we keep our job in the world because we have family commitments or whatever we're doing, there needs to be a realignment of our values. There needs to be a realignment of how we think about our time and our money, because we're not supposed to have our time and our money anymore. It's given to us to steward for him, but we're supposed to be investing our minas wisely. We're supposed to be investing our talents wisely. We're going to talk about that in the Brit Chadasha portion. And this is something for both houses to pray about, and Ishmael too. Because if we're violating the words of Elohim in the Torah of Moshe, the Torah of Musa, then what we're doing is we're violating the words of Elohim in the Torah of Moshe. And if we're replacing the words of Elohim, we're replacing the words of Elohim. It is what it is. And the penalty for disrespecting Yahweh Elohim, our king, like that is death. And that's something for both houses. It's something for the Talmudic community. It's also something for the Ephraimite community. And I'm sure probably Ishmael also. But brothers, how sane is it for us to say that we love Elohim and to say that we serve Elohim, but then we don't obey his words? How is that truthful? It doesn't make sense, brothers. If we say we love Elohim, if we say we're his servants, shouldn't we do what he says? Well, there's a lot more that we could say about the sacrifices and the symbolism behind this and that kind of sacrifice, and that's all important, but we don't have time this week. So we're going to jump to our Haftarah prophetic portion in Malachi 3. We'll also talk about Malachi 2, 3, and 4. And the numbering is different between the English and the Hebrew versions here. So in the Hebrew Masoretic text, which is the main text you see used by Judah, it says all one chapter is chapter 3. So we'll have chapters 2 and chapter 3. Now, in the Christian versions that the Asavite scribes made in the Middle Ages, for some reason, they decided to break off the last 6 verses, starting in Malachi chapter 3 and verse 19, and they renamed it as chapter 4. Or that may not be the exact history, but that's the effect. So the Christian version, the Nazaree version, has a chapter 4, which you can find in the Masoretic text. It starts in Malachi 3 and verse 19 and just keeps going. Okay, so with the Christian version, the Nazaree version, you have a super short chapter of about 6 verses as chapter 4. And to me, I'm not quite sure why they did that, because to me it reads as all one book, but that's how it is. That's Aesop for you. So if we start in Malachi chapter 3 and we just go to the end of the book, we're going to see both houses here. Both houses, both Judah and Joseph, have lessons to learn and apply here. I would recommend the whole book because we're talking about the times of the end. The time it applies to is right now. And it's easy, it's possible to read chapter 1 and to read about the sacrifices of the blind, the lame, and the sick. And it's easy to think that this doesn't have any parallel or any correspondence to today, but this would be wrong, because the time of Malachi is for now. And in chapter 2, the tribe of Levi desperately needs to read maybe for the first time Malachi chapter 2, because they don't teach rabbis the Tanakh in yeshiva. So in Malachi chapter 2 and verse 7, for example, Yahweh's talking to the priests in these end times. And Yahweh is rebuking his priests in these end times just prior to the return of Mashiach. And guess what he says? Yahweh says that the lips of a priest should guard knowledge, meaning knowledge from Elohim, and that because he guards knowledge from Elohim instead of replacing knowledge from Elohim, he guards it. For that reason, that's why the people should seek instruction from his mouth, because he's speaking the knowledge of the words of Elohim. That's his function. That's his job. That's his role. That's why Levi was chosen. Why doesn't Levi just go back to doing that now? He says the people should seek instruction from the mouths of his Levitical priests, because a true Levitical priest is a messenger of Yahweh of hosts. Because why? Because he's proclaiming what the voice of Yahweh Elohim said. Whether it's an active prophet, he's prophesying right now, or reading his words from years past. The point is, we as the children, we are to turn our hearts to the words of our fathers as recorded in his word. They've been handed down through our forefathers, no matter if for both houses. And likewise, the words of this prophecy of former years, it's written for us as his descendants many years later in these end times. So then in verse 8, Yahweh complains at his set apart messengers, the priests, in this case referring to the rabbis, the Haredi community, complaining that they have, well, not just the Haredi community, but the rabbis, complaining that they have departed from his way. With the Talmud, the rabbis have caused many to stumble at the Torah, because they teach people that the Talmud is the Torah. Their ethic is the Talmud of men replaces the Torah of Elohim. And Yahweh Elohim, Tsevaot, says that you have corrupted his covenant that he gave to Levi in the written Torah of Moshe. That is to say, you have corrupted the written Torah of Moshe. We hear it every week. Here's Yahweh saying it here in Malachi chapter 2. That's why we're saying it. It's like, how do you get through to people that think they can give the nod to Yahweh and go about their own business? Okay, how do you solve a problem like Ephraim? How do you solve a problem like Judah or Levi? Okay, if the two houses think that we can give the nod to Elohim, each in our own separate way, and we think, and then we're going to go about our business and do what we want, we're going to do a mystery Babylonian version of what he says to do. We're going to do what we want, and we think that's not going to cost us, then we need to keep reading because these words are for today.
We don't learn Tanakh in our schools because it's very deep and things can be misinterpreted. So they don't teach us Tanakh. We learn Talmud, we learn what we call Torah Sheba'al Peh. So if I would want to go into Yeshaya, what you call Isaiah, I would go to my Rebbe and I'd ask him to teach it to me. Like everything I don't understand and ask him to teach it to me. But things that I wasn't taught in school because I was told that it's deep to understand, I for sure won't just read texts and like.
What's appropriate? What's respectful to say? To speak the truth in love, that's at the same time, that's one of the funniest and one of the most tragic, saddest things I've ever seen in my life. Because basically what that brother is doing in the Haredi community, he's confessing to committing suicide. Because not only does he not listen for Elohim's voice, but he refuses to read the written record of Elohim's words that were handed down from former years by our forefathers that we're all supposed to be reading. Because what are we going to do? Make Elohim repeat himself? He has to give each one of us a burning bush revelation? No, we're supposed to be learning to read, learning to obey, learning to educate ourselves according to Elohim's words and not our own interpretations of Elohim's words, not our own wishful thinking. And now you have the Orthodox rabbis lying. Basically, I'm sure he thinks of himself as a faithful sheep. He's trusting himself. He's giving blind faith to the so-called guardians of the oral Torah who think that they know better than Elohim, who think that they know better than the words of Elohim given to Moshe, that the tribe of Levi is supposed to guard without alteration from generation to generation because that's the source, that's the base of their authority. What's respectful to say? The nascent Sanhedrin has no clothes. Let's take a look at some of the complaints Yahweh Elohim Tsevaot has against the rabbinical order, shall we? Okay, brothers, love you, but if the shoe fits, you need to wear it. Malachi 3 and verse 1, he says, "Behold, I send my messenger, and he will prepare the way before me. And Yahweh, whom you seek, will suddenly come to his temple, even the messenger of the covenant in whom you delight. Behold, he is coming, says Yahweh of hosts." We could say a lot of things here, but let's just keep going. Verse 2. "But who can endure the day of his coming? And who can stand when he appears?" Meaning, you think you're stronger than him? You think you can make up your own laws, your own rules, or you think you can ignore his laws? You think you can ignore his rules? You can't, because he is like a refiner's fire. He's like launderer's soap. Verse 3, "He will sit as a refiner and a purifier of silver. He will purify the sons of Levi and purge them as gold and silver, that they may offer to Yahweh an offering in righteousness and not in corruption and not in Talmud." And you know how they refine gold and silver, don't you? They hit them with so much heat. They get them so hot in the crucible that they melt. No more form, no more structure. They're liquid now. And when they've melted, now the impurities float to the top and you scrape the impurities off. Sound like fun? Doesn't sound real good. Wouldn't it have been better if our ancestors had just gone to the land of Israel, taken us 2-3 weeks? Would have been better. Oh, but we had to listen to Yahweh for that. Oh, yeah, right. No, we don't want to do that, do we? We don't want to hear his words and obey them, even though that's the only way to save your life in these end times. How do you talk with people who don't want to stop committing suicide because they don't believe? So, wouldn't it just be easier and better to ditch the Talmud and the so called oral Torah and go back to Elohim's words in the Tanakh? Wouldn't that show more trust and faith in Elohim, is to follow the written records of the words that Elohim actually spoke? That's all you have to do. Okay. Both Judah and Joseph, you stop being loyal to ourselves, as in Korach's rebellion, the two Korach's rebellions going on, and go back to being loyal to Yahweh Elohim. That's it. Zeu, listo, done. Verse 4. Then that's when the offering of Judah and Jerusalem will be pleasant to Yahweh again, as it used to be back in the days of old, back in former years. It used to be pleasant because we used to listen to him, at least more than we do now. And then he continues in verse 6. He says, "For I am Yahweh, and I do not change. My Torah did not change." Okay, but I am Yahweh. That's why I didn't consume you yet, Judah and Ephraim. I'm being patient. I'm long of nose. Verse 7. But the only problem is, from the days of your forefathers leaving Egypt, you have gone away from my ordinances. You have not kept them. We take a look at our forefathers in the land, in the Torah portion. We say, how could they be so stupid? How could they be so disobedient and not even understand that that's what they're doing? And the answer is because they're just like us, brothers. Judah and Joseph. Apple didn't fall too far from the tree. We could take this all the way back to Adam and Hava. But the idea was that once Yahweh Elohim Tsevaot sprung us from Egypt, we were supposed to become his faithful Proverbs 31 war bride. And this applies to both houses because both houses were there. All 12 tribes, or 13, however you want to count them, all the tribes were there. Okay, so what does Elohim want a Proverbs 31 helper bride for? What does he want her to do? Like he says many times, if we just read his word and incorporate it, live by it, like we're supposed to do, he wants her to listen for his voice and do what he says, including reading up on all of his words that he said before, as recorded by our forefathers in his word for us as the children. Okay. And we need not to be listening to our rabbis instead. We need to be not listening to our pastors instead. And the problem is, brothers, when we go stand before the throne in the judgment, and Elohim asks us, "Did you read my words?" We're going to say, "Oh, no, no. I thought I was supposed to listen to the pastor. I thought I was supposed to listen to the rabbis."
We don't learn Tanakh in our schools because it's very deep and things can be misinterpreted. So they don't teach us Tanakh. We learn Talmud. We learn what we call Torah Sheba'al Peh. So if I would want to go into Yeshaya, what you call Isaiah, I would go to my Rebbe and I'd ask him to teach it to me. Like everything I don't understand and ask him to teach it to me. But things that I wasn't taught in school because I was told that it's deep to understand, I for sure want to just read texts and
pray for that brother. It's painful to watch him commit suicide by ignorance. And Ephraim, brothers, please, can we please, 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 can we get it through our heads that reading the covenant is not the same thing as fulfilling it? Please, can we get it through our heads that reading the covenant is not the same thing as walking it out? Can we please get it through our heads that if we say, I keep Torah because of Yeshua's spirit, but then we don't do the things that we read Yeshua telling us to do, that it's a total lie, and that Yeshua hates hypocrites, no matter of which house, and he hates disobedience because his language, his love language is obedience. And it's just so sad. I send up so many prayers. I keep in prayer. I'm just praying. We already know that we're going to preach for 30 or 40 or 50 years, and Elohim willing, 10% of us will survive. And still, fully 90% of the house of Ephraim will not wake up to their identities as the lost tribes of Joseph and live like it, live the prophecies. Why? It's because I believe we would have to humble ourselves, give up our pride and our egotism, and put our maker and his son, our savior, and his spirit first, meaning ahead of ourselves, meaning we don't think about what we want, we think about what he would like. And neither house is willing to do that right now. And only 10% of Ephraim will ever do that. And yet, for all this, in verse 7, Yahweh still stays faithful to his faithless bride, saying, "Return to me, and I will return to you," says Yahweh of hosts. And that's the principle. If we return to him, he will return to us. If we stay with him, he will stay with us. So we stay with him. No matter where we're going, no matter what we're doing, we stay with him. Remain conscious of him. Listen for his voice. He says, "But you said, in what way shall we return?" And now we find out one reason why we didn't return all the way. In verse 8, Elohim asks, "Will a man rob Elohim?" So, yet you have robbed me. But Ephraim and Judah say, "In what way have we robbed you?" Yahweh says, "In the tithes and the offerings." Verse 9, "And because of this, you are cursed with the curse, for you have robbed me, even this whole nation." Obviously, if you're paying your tithes, you're exception to the rule. But in general, and how is the priesthood supposed to operate without income, without funding? What kind of respect does it show Elohim? So you talk with Ephraimites, and we can understand the concept of building a physical temple and the manning of a physical temple. We understand, just like any government activity, just like any army in the field, that would take support. It would take resources. It would take work. There's a manpower requirement. There's a funding requirement. And I'm told by several people, including several rabbis, that the Temple Institute is very well funded. That's a quote, because people can understand the need for resources to build a physical temple to Elohim. But how many of us in the house of Ephraim get the concept that the Great Commission of Matthew 28 and verse 19, 20, it is the prime directive for all those of us who want to be Proverbs 31 bridal candidates? Our job as spiritual war bridal candidates is to help Mashiach Nagid establish the global spiritual government that his father sent him to get us to establish in his absence. It's like, it's one thing to know it intellectually, it's another thing to align your life with it spiritually and walk it out that way. Daniel chapter 7 and verse 27 tells us that after Esav, the little horn, and falls the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven, all of that is going to be given to the people, the set apart ones of the Most High, Nazarene Israel. It says his kingdom, the faith in the end is the faith Yeshua established in the beginning. It says his kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. So we do a whole drash on that in the Torah government study. The power and dominion are given to the people. And so yet all the nations serve and obey him. The only way that can happen is if his people listening for his voice and walking out what he says to do. This is not a small job. This is not a little bitty thing. This is not something we can cook up sitting in our friends' living rooms. And what we need to do, brothers, sisters, we need to prepare ourselves for this role. We need to prepare ourselves for his coming kingdom. And this is not a joke. We have a requirement to establish the kingdom for him in his absence. And we're told his worship is to be a solemn assembly. So, I remember I've hosted Sukkot several times. So I had this one family came to Sukkot. I was in Oak Harbor, Washington, and apparently they just thought the whole thing was supposed to be fun and games. It was just all about enjoyment. So, it's not that we can't enjoy ourselves along the way, but that we shouldn't chase that. That shouldn't be our goal. So I tried to tailor the instruction as best I could for them to help clarify matters for them in the teaching. But it was for some reason like they couldn't even hear me because what they said they wanted was to have an argument, meaning like a Monty Python style argument. So this is one of those things Mr. Autism didn't know what to say because I was too busy asking myself, wondering to myself, how do you talk with people who say they fear Elohim and yet through their actions, they have no fear of Elohim? And they say they're all about the Great Commission. They say they're disciples. They say they're on board, but somehow it's all about him serving them. It's never about the Great Commission. It's never about fivefold unity on a single foundation of apostles and prophets or apostles and elders, but rather it's only about having fun. And as I look back, it's how representative were they? It was almost prophetic. How representative were they about the house of Ephraim? Because in the house of Judah, they're headed the wrong direction, but they're making great time. In the house of Ephraim, it's all about walking a broad, easy road, receiving all the blessings that you can. Even though we've left the house of Esau, at least nominally, there's people still belonging to the pink horse. They're still tainted red with Esau's spirit because it's not about Elohim. It's about Elohim serving us. It's about joining the Bless Me Club. Okay, but we never get around. Somehow we never get around to reading the book of Acts and making sure our worship looks like that. Somehow we never get around to reading the renewed covenant and asking ourselves, am I walking that way really? Father, please take away from me anything that you find unpleasing. Please give me more of your son's spirit. Please conform me to your will. Please conform me to what you want, because I'm here to serve you. Because not only did you make me, but after I transgressed away, you sent your son to die to bring me back. So you own me twice over. I'm yours to start with, and you came and got me back. Our story is the story of Gomer. So we have a lot of Ephraimite families who seem to be seating themselves on the throne, so to speak. And this one Ephraimite family who came to Oak Harbor, Washington, they left all huffed off that they didn't get to ignore what we were talking about Elohim's words so they could waste time playing silly games. And a lot of that's my fault. I don't always know how to communicate to people what I see, especially when they're not listening, especially when they don't want to hear, especially when they don't have a drive inside because they don't really love Yeshua. They're more in love with the concept of someone who, our forefathers transgressed away from the written Torah. So off we go into the nations. Oh, and now here we find ourselves in a prosperous nation. Oh, and now he saves us in our sins. What a wonderful guy. I love that Yeshua. Oh, hey. So we'll just change the day of nominal rest and worship from Sunday to Sabbath. We're good to go. We give up Christmas and Easter, and now we have the feasts. We have Saturday Night Live. We have party. We have silly games. You try to explain the concept of his worship should be a solemn assembly, but you can't seem to get through. So yeah, I mean, if that's all you want is to live your life in this world in Yeshua's name, if all that's all you want is to fun and silly games, you want Disneyland, yes? Okay, well, if that's what you want is Disneyland, if you want fun and games, if you want a broad, easy road, then why should ministry cost anything? Because if we're not trying to establish the kingdom for Yeshua in his absence, as he tells us to do in his word, then yeah, I mean, our only goal is to entertain ourselves in his name and to live our lives in the world in his name, because we're functionally believing atheists. Or in Ephraim's case, we're the drunkards of Ephraim of Isaiah chapter 28 and verse 1. So, my preference would be to be positive and encouraging. This isn't really fun for me. So, how should I say? How can we say this with respect? It's not really my goal in life to be perceived like a wet blanket, but the problem is, in spiritual terms, we're required to be adults. If you're brand new, you just got called to the faith, this is brand new to you, give yourself some time. It takes time for all of us when we're infants to grow into children, from children to grow into teens, from teens to go into adults, and from there. So it takes time in our growing and walking in the faith. But those of us who are more mature need to be doing more. We need to be providing a better beacon of leadership as to how to unify on a fivefold unified foundation. And what it seems like, to speak the truth in love. I don't know how else to do it. It's like, if we want to keep people from dying, we have to call them out on their sin. And just to speak the truth in love, it's kind of reminds me of a bunch of delinquent school children who don't want to come back in from recess. They don't want lunch break to be over ever. They want to be let out for summer forever and never have to get a job. So it's my job to help us all realize what's coming. Well, I have to help. It's not my job to help you realize what's coming. It's my job to tell you what I see. So I'm reading scripture and I'm telling you what I see. If you want to check the word out, I encourage everyone to read the entire website at least twice. And the point is not twice. The point is so you really get it. Usually that's at least twice, because my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. We need to know what's coming. We need to realize what's coming. We need to get ready, get alert, get awake, get aware, work together, build the kingdom as he wants, so that the 10% of Ephraim that wants to build the stick of Ephraim, according to Yeshua's words, and then perhaps survive what's coming. I don't know how else to say it, but the Ephraimites I've met, it's like Ephraim be like, no, we don't need no sacrifice. We don't need no thing that's not free. Yeshua's got me. I'm good. No, there's no need for me to take personal responsibility for the Great Commission, because Yahweh knows my heart. We don't need to do anything unless we really want to, because we're covered by the blood and Yahweh knows our heart. Because we said the John 3:16 prayer completely out of context. We're taking the words in the Greco-Roman Babylonian sense instead of understanding them in Hebraic context, that to believe on Yeshua means you do literally everything he says the best that you can, because he's a king. And if you don't do what he tells you to do, you're going to die. And that's it. And it's like, how do you get Ephraim out of the peacetime mentality? People have money for horses. People have money for cars. People have money for airplanes. Some of them, people have money for vacations. Like one woman, one sister, one time, she said, well, I would like to make a donation to your ministry, but I have to take a vacation to Alaska. It's like, okay, I know Yahweh's going to give me everything I need to serve him. I'm going to have food, I'm going to have clothing, and probably he's going to give me what I need. That's it. So I'm not worried about that part. I'm worried for that sister, because if that's the disrespect with which we treat Yahweh Elohim, then we say, oh, Yahweh knows our heart. Yeah, Yahweh knows our heart, because why? Because he inspects our fruit. Is the fruit rotten, or is the fruit good and true and pure? of the 10% kind that he's going to want to keep for himself. Because that other attitude, that's straight out of Rome. That's straight from Asaph. As we have already seen many times, Yehezkel 37 and verse 16 shows us that before we come home, we need to organize. Not just some democratically based Zionist political initiative, not democracy, not the Babylonian political system. I guess we'll just have to keep on saying it. So I apologize for the repetition. We're trying to help people stitch things together to give them the big picture panorama and help people integrate things. People help people to understand what needs to happen, because this is all of us. This is us. Here we are. It's the end times. What are we going to do? How are we going to survive this thing is by obeying Yeshua. So I try to help people understand what's required. So Ephesians chapter 2 and verse 20 tells us to unify on a single foundation of apostles and prophets, or apostles and elders, and it has to pattern after Yeshua. Well, again, Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 11 tells us that Yeshua, Mashiach Nagid, Mashiach the teller himself, said that the fivefold ministry gifts are supposed to work together to knit the body into one, to refine the body into one. The thing is, it's not a game. This is what people don't seem to understand, at least not since the Protestant Reformation. It's not a game, and it's not a spectator sport. It's a group participant sport called nation building. Does Ephraim, we had an American Revolution. Have we forgotten what it takes to found a nation? There's people in other countries that belong to the house of Ephraim. What does it take to found a nation? Well, Yeshua tells us, Scripture tells us what it takes to found his nation according to his standards. He shows us how he wants the stick of Ephraim to be formed, the stick of Joseph in the hand of Ephraim. He shows us these things. I show you the results of my studies on the website. If you're a person, you truly want to know, what does Yeshua say to do? The studies are all right there. So I'm going to try and give you shorthand in the parashot, but the studies are all right there. I encourage you to read them so that you know what is being taught. And if you happen to agree that the studies are an accurate reflection of the Tanakh and the Brit Chadasha, then the only question is, brothers, are we going to be faithful? So, when Elohim gives you something, when he gives you a gift, and it's this precious gift right there, he gives you the greatest inheritance ever. Do we turn up our nose and go, ew, it costs too much? No, I don't want it. No, not really. So I'll just pretend. I just put on a mystery Babylonian show. No, you don't do that. You seize on it. You thank Elohim profusely for giving you this marvelous gift. And not only do you thank him with your words, but you thank him through your actions for the opportunity to be of some kind of service to him. So you thank him not just with your words, but with what you do. We close the knowing doing gap. So the problem is that it seems like today, still 99+% of Ephraim, they will say, yes, of course we need to glorify Yeshua's name, but how are they doing it? They say, yes, of course we know we need to walk even as he walked, but how are we doing it? By resting on Sabbath instead of Sunday? That's it? That's the Great Commission. Many of us, brothers, sisters, do we think we know secretly better than Yeshua? Malachi 3 and verse 10 says, bring all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. And so the job can get done, so the ministry word can go forth. It's not about people having a bigger jet. It's not about people having a big mansion or a big house. It's so that there's enough to do the job. With a priesthood that doesn't own anything, but still needs resources to do the job. And Yahweh says, try me, test me now in this, says Yahweh of hosts. and see if I will not open for you the windows of heaven and pour out for you such blessing that there will not be enough room to receive it. And we have to ask ourselves, do we believe this or not believe this? Verse 11, and I will rebuke the devourer for your sakes, so that he will not destroy the fruit of your ground. Wouldn't that be nice? Nor shall the vine fail to bear fruit for you in the field, says Yahweh of hosts. That's what happens when we're faithful to support his work. So forgive me, but does Judah know why you have problems in Gaza? It's not because of Ishmael. It's because when you divide your loyalty, when you hop between two opinions, when you give your loyalty to the rabbis and the Talmud, and then just give the nod to Yahweh and his written Torah, that's not obeying Elohim. We shouldn't have to tell the tribe of Levi this. How ironic. So, what happens in the Middle East? You're struggling and you're fighting to try to figure out a solution to the Gaza problem. Hey, did you think about going back to the Tanakh? If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, turn from replacing my word with their own words, that's when he will heal us. Well, in verse 12 here, Yahweh says that if we will just go back to doing what he says, then all the nations will call us blessed. And he will make the land delightful. There won't be any problems like Gaza or Hezbollah, because Yahweh himself will turn the problems back. Yahweh himself will turn the devourer back if we will just be faithful to help his son's kingdom go forth. Then in verse 14, how many of us does this apply to? Be honest. Let's be honest with ourselves. How many of us are actually confused exactly on this point, but we don't even know it? He says, you have said, Ephraim and Judah, it's useless to serve Elohim. It's useless to follow Yahweh's Torah. The way he says, what profit or what benefit is it? We've kept his ordinance and that we've walked as mourners before Yahweh of hosts. Verse 15. So now we call the proud blessed. And those who do wickedness, those are the ones that get raised up in the evening news. Those are the ones everyone in society looks to. Those are the rich elites. They even tempt Elohim and they go free. You have Zerah-controlled Masonic Lodge monsters like Albert Pike. He was the sovereign grand commander of the southern jurisdiction of the Masonic Lodge's Scottish Rite. And the Masonic Lodge is a tool of the Illuminati. The Illuminati is a tool of Zerah. And he lets us know, Albert Pike, that anytime the Illuminists or the Masons need a hero to lead the people in the wrong direction, Zerah will provide that leader. That's how the Babylonian political situation works. Verse 16, but in those end times, there was still a small remnant who feared Yahweh and spoke to one another. And Yahweh listened to them and heard them. So a book of remembrance was written before him for those who fear Yahweh and who meditate on his name. How are we going to glorify his name? We have to actually do something to glorify his name. Judah's busy, which is the wrong thing. Ephraim needs to get Judah's zeal for that. Verse 17, they shall be mine, those who fear Yahweh and meditate upon his name. They shall be mine, says Yahweh of hosts. On the day that I make them my jewels. Wouldn't that be nice to be one of Yahweh's jewels? What does it take to become one of Yahweh's jewels? Children, you set your mind on what you want to be when you grow up. Wouldn't you like to be one of Yahweh's jewels? He says, I will spare them as a man spares his own son who serves him. Verse 18, then you shall again discern between the wicked and the righteous, between the righteous and the wicked, between one who serves Elohim and one who does not serve Elohim, because he's going to smite all those who do not serve him according to his word. And we saw in chapter 2, Malachi chapter 2, that he has plans to purify and refine the sons of Levi. And this is for the rest of us as well. Now, the Christian versions will switch to chapter 4 for the final 6 verses, but in the Masoretic text, it just keeps going in chapter 3. They don't break off the last 6 verses. Verse 1, for behold, the day is coming, burning like an oven, and all the proud, meaning those who don't humble themselves to read Yahweh's word and to do everything what it says to the best of their ability, just like you'd serve an earthly king. You'd serve an earthly king carefully. How about the King of Kings? He says, all the proud who don't do that. Yes, all the wickedly will be stubble. Wicked person, that's someone who turns others away from the Torah, like the rabbis, like the Talmud. It says, and all the proud who do not obey, and yes, all the wickedly who teach people not to obey. And the day which is coming shall burn them up, says Yahweh of hosts. Is that why Judah doesn't read the Tanakh? That day will leave them neither root nor branch, meaning if you're not doing what Yahweh says to do in humble obedience and humble service, you're not going to make it. And the difference is your children also are not going to make it this time. And I think this is something most people don't think about and most people don't realize. Because when we failed Yahweh in the wilderness, when our forefathers let him down, he let our children enter in the first time. But what he's saying right here, he's saying, not this time. He's saying, if we don't obey him this time, he will leave us nothing. Do we understand what he's saying here? This time, if we don't do what he says exactly to the T with a correct and humble heart, it's lights out. Verse 2, but to you who fear my name, meaning we actually do what he says, we walk out what he says. We ask him, Master, please make us your hands and your feet. Please help us to do the things Mashiach Nagid said to do. For them, they're going to do the good things. The Son of Righteousness shall arise with healing in his wings. And you shall go out and grow fat like stall-fed calves. You shall trample the wicked, for they shall be ashes under the soles of your feet on the day that I do this. And it's coming, says Yahweh of hosts. And that's what we want, right? We want to see the word of Yahweh fulfilled. We want to be on his good side when it is fulfilled, right? Okay, so how do we get there? Verse 4, Yahweh says, to remember the written Torah of Moshe, my servant, which I commanded him in Horeb for all Israel. That's the first step. That's part of the solution. Judah, forget the Talmud. It's worm food. Okay, go back to Yahweh's Torah with the statutes and the judgments that Yahweh gave.
We don't learn Tanakh in our schools because it's very deep and things can be misinterpreted. So they don't teach us Tanakh. We learn Talmud. We learn what we call Torah Sheba'al Peh. So if I would want to go into Yeshaya, what you call Isaiah, I would go to my Rebbe and I'd ask him to teach it to me. Like everything I don't understand, and I ask him to teach it to me. But things that I wasn't taught in school because I was told that it's deep to understand, I for sure want just to read texts and like.
Verse 5, behold, I will send to you Eliyahu Hanavi, or someone in the power and the spirit of Eliyahu Hanavi, before the coming of the great and dreadful day of Yahweh. Verse 6, he will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers, lest I come and strike the earth with utter destruction. In this verse, this is where we have to call double-mindedness, or perhaps schizophrenia, crazy menticitis on both Judah and Ephraim. Not that anyone's perfect here, but here we have two houses who are claiming to believe on Yahweh, but each in their own way, they're not going to do what Yahweh says. And they're going to claim his divine protection. They're going to call on him in that day, and he's not going to answer. Because why? Because we're doing our own thing in his name. What's that look like to the heavenly divine council? What does that make him look like? Here, he says effectively, if you're not going to do what I told you to do, what use? What do I need that for? So, with that being the reality, what do we do now, brothers? Except start obeying his words. Judah and Levi replace Yahweh's words with their own books. Then they're super busy and they're super active establishing their own kingdom. And Ephraim reads all the right books, but he just doesn't feel like doing what he reads because it's too much work, right? So the question is, are we integrated? Do we make sense spiritually? Maybe we make sense materially, but not spiritually. Something to think about. Okay, do we believe Elohim here, or do we not believe Elohim here if we're not doing what he says? Because really, you have to pick one. You have to pick the right one. You can't have it both ways. You can't believe what Elohim says about obeying his words without alteration and then keep the Talmud. You can't tell me, and then Ephraim, you can't tell me you read Elohim's words about what to do and you've already done them, even though you're not taking pains to do everything what the word says. I want to say encouraging words. I want to encourage Ephraim not to be spiritually drunk. And I want to encourage Levi and Judah not to be so full of themselves. We're talking about the day of Yahweh here in Malachi. In a renewed covenant context, that can tie to many different passages, but most of us would think primarily of Matthew chapter 24, Matityahu or Matthew chapter 24. But in Matityahu chapter 24, what we're talking about is the kind of destruction we're going to see. We're not sure, 30, 40, 50 years from now. It's going to come increasingly. You think things are bad now. One ministry prophet said that the tribulation began in 2009 or something like that. Just absurd. Just absolutely absurd. Anyone who says that. So what prophecy says, read the Revelation in the End Time Study or watch the video series Revelation Simplified. We don't know time. We don't know times or dates. We just know sequences. But where we are in the timeline, in the Revelation timeline, log into the website, Revelation News. We've got another 30 or 40 or 50 years approximately until the day of Yahweh comes, or at least according to the sequences. So if it's bad now, it's going to continue to get worse. And so you have to ask yourself, okay, if it's going to be that bad, which it is, worse than that, you say, what can I do? How can I, was one person, preserve the lives of myself and my family? And first, we have to believe his word that, yes, it's going to get that bad. But if we believe his word, that's an excellent question to be asking. What can we do? How can we preserve ourselves? And one answer is not to try to preserve ourselves in our own power and strength, but to get right with Yahweh, and he'll turn the devourer back. So right after Matityahu chapter 24 comes Matityahu chapter 25. And this specifically talks about how we can avoid getting destroyed. So if anyone's interested, perhaps Prime Minister Netanyahu might be interested, or perhaps the Sanhedrin that advises him. In Matityahu chapter 25, starting in verse 1, we have the parable from Mashiach Nagid of the 5 wise and the 5 foolish virgins. Now, there's a number of different takes on this. We don't want to suggest that 5 of the tribes are wise and 5 of the tribes are foolish, but it does seem difficult for 10 tribe Ephraimite Israel to avoid the obvious parallel symbolism of the 10 lost tribes of the house of Joseph or Ephraim. Actually, we have representatives from all 12 tribes, all 13 tribes, but that's a separate issue. Talk about that in other places. As we will see in other places, in passages such as verses such as Matthew chapter 15 and verse 24, Yeshua came on his first trip, on his first advent, primarily for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. You say, how could that be? His disciples were Jewish. Read his words right here. He says that he came for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Those are other names for Joseph or the house of Ephraim. You know, we're like a bunch of Texans. Everyone's got three first names, right? We're like a bunch of organic farmer warriors or something. I don't know. But in telling us these things, Yeshua is trying to help us to stay safe from the destruction that's to come. And Yeshua tells us that in that day, in these days, now, today, coming up soon, next 30, 40, 50 years, the kingdom of heaven shall be likened to 10 Proverbs 31 war bride virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom, Yeshua. Now, sadly, only five of them were wise. Sadly, the other five were foolish. Fool of those who says in his heart, Yahweh doesn't see, Yahweh doesn't know, there is no Yahweh, I don't need to obey Yahweh. That's foolish in biblical context. Verse 3, those who didn't fear Yahweh, those who were foolish, those who didn't do what Yahweh said to do, they took their lamps, they brought lamps, but they brought no oil with them. So the wise also took extra oil in their vessels along with their lamps. And oil can be symbolic of the Spirit. So effectively, 5 of the bridal candidates had a little bit of the Spirit, not enough, and 5 had enough because they made a point of bringing extra. They made a point of preparing. And what we need to know here, what we need to realize is that if we have Yeshua's Spirit, we're going to bear fruit like Yeshua. We're going to manifest having his Spirit. If we honestly have Yeshua's Spirit, it's going to lead us to do the same kinds of things that Yeshua did. Yeshua's Spirit will lead us to lay down our lives of pleasure in the world, enjoying the pleasures of unrighteousness, so that we can do more to help our husband. This is what I just Ephraim, I just want to shake them. Just the need to get busy, the need to get active, the need to acknowledge it's no longer your life. I've seen people taking trips in motorhomes. I've seen people taking trips with ATVs. I've seen people just going somewhere. How many do we see saying, you know what? I think I'd rather live. I think I'd rather serve Yeshua. I think I'd rather show my husband that I love him. I think I'd rather obey Mashiach Nagid of Daniel 9 and verse 26. So we need to be not just some Proverbs 31 bridal candidate who only reads the words of Elohim. We need to be a Proverbs 31 bridal candidate that not only reads the words of Elohim, but then checks them carefully because she wants to know what it says. And then she realizes, you know what? I may be the slave princess candidate. I may be the slave queen candidate, but he's the king. He's my maker. He bought me back. My life is no longer my own. And I'm not free to interpret things the way Esav would interpret them. And I'm not free to make up my own thing either. So she effectively salutes her husband and her king, and she plays the good number 2. She eagerly does what she can to help her husband grow his kingdom. That's the whole message right there. So it's kind of like we are interns right now, and he wants to see what we're going to do. If I were to make you my slave queen, what would you do with it? Show me. That's what we got right now. And if the answer is nothing or not much, not mine to judge what's going to happen. I don't know. That's way above my pay grade. But just judging from what Yeshua says, verse 5, but while the bridegroom was delayed, if you think about that, that means he's not coming to rapture you out. We're going to go through the tribulation. Okay, so while the bridegroom was delayed, they all slumbered and slept. In the Hebrew wedding model, the feasts of Yahweh all indicate phases of the Hebrew wedding, the spirit wedding that's going on. We talk about this more in our studies on the feasts and the calendar, but the prophetic picture is that of a bridegroom arriving on Yom Kippur for his bride, and that's symbolic of Mashiach coming for his Proverbs 31 war bridal candidate. So Yom Kippur is the most set apart day of the year. That's the wedding. And on Yom Teruah, just before that, 10 days before, on Yom Teruah, the day of trumpets, the bridegroom traditionally sends his messenger before him to announce his soon coming arrival with trumpet blasts from the shofar, the ram's horn. And the purpose is to announce the bridegroom's arrival so the brides can wake up and trim their lamps and be ready for the bridegroom when he comes. And in the wedding model, there's a very great emphasis on a wise bride choosing to be completely ready in every way when her husband comes for her. She wants everything to be just right for him. She wants everything to be in accordance with his wishes so as to become pleasing to him. And being ready is perhaps the most important part of the test. But how many in Ephraim, how many of us actually think about the need to be ready for him? How many of us, we think back and we rely on John chapter 3 and verse 16 instead of relying on the need to be ready for our husband with a spotless, blemishless dress? Just be ready in every way, to be good soldiers, good servants of Yeshua Messiah, to be good slaves. You know, kind of seems sometimes like most of Ephraim thinks we're going to have a pop quiz on our knowledge. As long as you ace the intellectual test, you're good. And instead, what we're actually going to see is we're going to have a review of our lifelong productivity for him. We're going to have a fruit inspection. We're going to have inspection of our lifelong fruit production for him. What did we do for him? What did we fail to do for him? Did we put him and his desires first? Did we do the things Yeshua said to do? There's going to be a lot of Ephraimites surprised. 90% of Ephraim is going to be surprised. Today, if it was to happen today, I would more than 99% of Ephraim would be surprised. Because why? Because we're not doing the things Yeshua said. It's doing the things Yeshua said. That's making the oil for our lamps. Without that oil, we go to the outer darkness where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. And it's our own fault because we had all summer, 2,000 years. We had all summer to be ready. Verse 6, Yeshua says that about midnight, that's symbolic of Yom Teruah, the bridegroom sent his messenger ahead, and the bridegroom announces with the shofar blast, Yom Teruah, behold, the bridegroom is coming, go out to meet him. Verse 7, then all those virgins arose and trimmed their lamps. And the foolish said to the wise, give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out. And we didn't spend our time getting prepared like you did. We didn't really love him. We'd like to pretend we love him, but we don't really know him. We don't really love him. So we didn't really bother to scrutinize our behavior. We didn't really use the summer to get ready for him. We didn't learn what kinds of things are pleasing to him. We just figured we'd do the Babylonian version and he would rubber stamp what we would like to do for him. Isn't that good enough? So we can live our lives in the world in his name? And what this means in a nutshell is that this kind of bridal candidate isn't going to make it because why? Because she doesn't have the fullness of his spirit. She did not receive the love of the truth. She did not receive the love of Yeshua as much as she thought, as evidenced by the lack of fruit, as evidenced by the lack of Proverbs 31 war bride behavior. Her wedding dress is not ready. She doesn't have a garment of humble submission to the Spirit of his voice. The Great Commission means nothing to them. It's the Great Omission. What does he want that for? We had all summer to get ready, 2,000 years to get ready. 90% of us, right now, 99% of us don't care. Praise Yah. We're praying hard for that future 10%. But, brothers and sisters, is this us? Do we perhaps think we love him? We believe we love him. We believe we have the fullness of his spirit, but there's no fruit. We see the cloud, but there's no rain. Heap, big smoke, and no fire. I think the thing that trips people up is that we all know we have part of his spirit because we felt something at some point. So we have at least part of his spirit because the 5 foolish virgins, they have at least some oil in their lamps, yes? They just didn't bring the extra jug. They didn't make a few extra liters or a few extra gallons. So they didn't have enough oil because they didn't prepare. Why? Because they didn't have enough of his spirit. They didn't care. They didn't really love Yeshua. So they said to the wise virgins who had been preparing, let us have some of your spirit. And that's kind of like people, forgive me, but that's kind of like people who think they're going to be approved. They think they're already chosen and approved because they're watching videos for free on YouTube, but they don't care enough to get involved. They know Yeshua wants us to build his kingdom in his absence, but they don't want to get involved. They don't want to put skin in the game. So, and then there's other people, they call themselves Nazarenes. Okay, if you're checking things out, welcome. If you're calling yourself a Nazarene, there's a lot of people, they call themselves Nazarenes now, but they're not getting involved in Yeshua's program. It doesn't count. You have to build that love for yourself. You have to pray for more of his spirit for yourself. So that's why the wise answered and said, no, sorry, we love you, but we can't give you any of our spirit, lest there should not be enough both for us and for you. Okay, so what you need to do, you need to go instead to those who sell and get some more for yourselves. Because, you know, and what that means is you're gonna have to get down into the bleachers, down into the grandstands, gotta get up off your lazy boy, gotta get up off your sofa, gotta get up off your behind end. Okay, and you have to come down onto the field and get sweaty and dirty and get some skin in the game like the rest of us. Okay, and we need to remember to bring him our A game. We need to bring him our very first and finest. We need to bring him our best because, in a very real sense, we are playing for the championship, brothers, sisters. Verse 10. And while the foolish ones had to go off to buy oil, that's when the bridegroom came, of course. And those who were ready, keyword ready, like he wants us to be ready, completely ready, doing everything he said to do. Those who were ready went in with him to the wedding, and the door was shut. Keyword shut. And afterward, the other virgins, the 90%, they came also saying, Adon, Adon, open to us. But he answered and said, assuredly, I say to you, I do not know you, because you don't have my spirit. You don't really care about me. That's why you didn't do the works that I said to do and that my spirit would have had you do if you were open to my spirit. But you didn't. It may sound harsh to you. Maybe you don't agree, but you don't care about me. You don't want to obey me. You don't want to help me in the mission my father sent me to get done. What do I want, a lead weight? I don't want to offend you, but did you ever think about what I wanted to get in this thing? Okay, I wanted to get a Proverbs 31 war bride, candidate for slave princess, who loves me enough that she's willing to do whatever she can to help me get the kingdom my father sent me to get you to build for me in my absence. Okay, I gave the kingdom of heaven is offered. There's a cost. You have to buy into the program. It's crowd-funded, and we are the crowd. It's a crowd participant sport, not just a crowd, it's organized. And he says, watch therefore, for you do not know. You know neither the day nor the hour in which the Son of Man is coming. We know it's coming 30, 40, 50 years. We just don't know exactly when. We know the sequences, we don't know the times. So here's one of those places. Brothers, love you, but we just have to call out Ephraim for being double-minded, schizophrenic, because Ephraim says he believes on Yeshua, the Messianic movement. Let's pick on the Messianics, but they don't believe his words. They don't believe his words of organization. They don't believe his words of the Great Commission. They don't believe the fivefold ministry. They don't believe the need for a single foundation of apostles and prophets, or at least they behave as if they do not believe his words. And the way Elohim looks at things, that's the same thing. In fact, that's worse because that's hypocrisy. So Elohim, unlike the Greco-Roman Babylonian John 3:16 model, Elohim just doesn't go based on what you say. You just say the John 3:16 prayer, listo, zeu, finished, done. He doesn't do that. Elohim, he listens to what you say. He wants to hear you make the confession, but then he has watchers to see if you do it or not, and to write everything down in books. And if you say one thing and what you do is not the same, or if you have a knowing doing, you profess, but you don't do, that's instant disqualification. Hypocrisy is instant disqualification. And we just see it all over the place. We see it happen again and again and again in the house of Ephraim. So a word to the wise is sufficient, but we need to keep on preaching it. And then Yeshua gives us another piece of advice as to how to survive the coming day of Yahweh. So he gives us the parable of the talents. And this is a synoptic account, it's a synoptic parallel to the parable of the minas in Luke chapter 19. But here in Matthew 25, starting in verse 14, Yeshua tells us that the kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling to a far country. In the parallel synoptic account in Luke 19 and verse 12, Yeshua said, a certain nobleman, Yeshua, went into a far country, heaven, to receive for himself a kingdom, to be named as king in his own right, and then to return. So in context, what are we talking about here? We're talking about Mashiach, the prince of Daniel 9 and verse 26, who's cut off, but not for himself, at the end of the Second Temple period, just before the Second Temple was destroyed. And as a result, he goes away to heaven to get the kingdom that is rightfully his. And he wants his servants to be busy while he's gone, making things better for him, not just thinking of him, not just reading his words, certainly not replacing his words with our own version. But coming back to Matthew chapter 25 and verse 14, yes, the Yeshua tells us that the kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling to a far country. And he called his own servants, referring to Yeshua's disciples or disciples' descendants, meaning us, disciples. And he delivered his goods to them. He gave them all a saved life so they could work for him while he was gone. And of course, increase his holdings like any master wants his servants to do. Verse 15. And to one, he gave 5 talents because he was very capable. Another, he judged to be capable of working with 2 talents. And then To a third, he gave 1 talent, to each according to his own ability. And immediately he went on a journey because he got cut off in Daniel chapter 9 and verse 26. Okay, now, house of Ephraim, if we get prideful, think of this. Okay. If we think we're already cool, we're supposed to be doing more than we are. Okay. If we're self satisfied, that's a sure sign we're not trying hard enough because we don't love him enough and he knows the difference. Okay, there shouldn't be a single person in the house of Ephraim, including myself, who should be presently pleased and satisfied with this current level of performance and with the current state of things in the house of Ephraim. Because we're always supposed, no matter who we are, no matter what our birth defects, developmental disorder defects, no matter what kind of injuries we've had, we're all supposed to be striving to do more for our master because he's going to be our king. We're hoping to get married. We need to remember that thought. Okay, if a bride is described as a helper, what kind of helper does he want? Does he want a faithful, quality helper? Or does he just want some helper that does maybe 40% of what he says? 40%, that's a biblical number, right? Yeah. 40%, that's an A, right? We do 40% on a test, that's an A, is it? Oh, yeah, no. Well, verse 16, Yeshua says, then he who had received the 5 talents went and traded with them and made yet another 5 talents. So he tried to do something. It wasn't easy, but according to his ability, he went and made more for his master. And likewise, he who had received 2 traded with them and gained 2 more also, because they're working for their Adon. They care about their Adon. Like Eliezer, they're constantly trying to make things better for their Adon. They're not just sitting around in their friend's living room, eating lunch, doing nothing, talking about what they should be doing. No, they're actually doing something for their Adon, each one in accordance with his ability. Not according to his comfort level, brothers, his ability. You get the difference? Verse 18, but he who had received only 1 talent, he was afraid. So he went and dug in the ground and he hid his master's money, meaning he received the same gift of eternal life as everyone else. Okay, he received the same spirit as everyone else. He read the same books as everyone else, but then he did nothing with it. He did nothing with his saved life to help his master and king, future husband, expand his holdings. Because why? Because he wasn't thinking about his master. He didn't really care about his master. His concern was not for his master, his concern was for himself. We'll plan to say in the future, but let's leave the rabbis aside to one side here just for the moment. Okay, and just speaking to the house of Ephraim, for full disclosure, my dad always said we had Jewish blood. My stepmother said he seemed Jewish to her, whatever that meant. So, I don't know, but he was like, we're Christians. So that's the way I was raised. We're going to leave Judah to one side here. But how many of us in the house of Ephraim, we don't really care what Yeshua wants? Like, when was the last time we thought about what Yeshua wants? And that should be a constant thought. If we're in connection with the vine, if we're listening for his spirit, we're listening for what he wants. But how many of us even think of that? How many of us realize that? How many of us understand that we're called to work together to increase our master's holdings? How many of us, notes ream, even have thought about how to help our master's kingdom grow? Okay, we're thrilled to spend our time and our money on what? What do we spend it on? We spend it on ourselves? Or are we thrilled to spend our time and our money as like our favorite hobby, so to speak, and duty? But our favorite hobby in all the world, something we love to do, is to love to help our husband get the kingdom that his father wants us to build for him. That's it. He wants a bride. And it's like the bozo filter. It's like the screen out. It's the shakedown cruise. He wants to see who loves him enough to volunteer, figure it, you may have ability 5, you may have ability 2, you may only have ability 1, but whatever it is Elohim gives us, we're supposed to be using it for him. We're supposed to be good servants trying to expand his holdings, make life better for our master because we want him to be king of the world. So can we picture it? Ephraim, our master rides off on a white horse. And right as he's going, he says, when you see me again, I will be king in my own right. And I want you to serve me as faithfully as Eliezer served Abraham. You say, yes, I will, and then you don't do it. He says, I want you to build my kingdom while I'm gone. There's plenty to do. Here's your instructions. 5-fold unity on a single foundation to perform the Great Commission. And this is what will build my kingdom. And we say, yes, I will. Thank you so much for the gift of eternal life. Thank you so much for the gift of the Spirit. But then we don't tithe, we don't give time, we don't do anything because why? Because we don't really care, because we don't really love him. Because when you love someone, you're eager to spend your time and your money on them. You think about your children, you love your children, you want more time and more money to spend on them to help them grow up. But are you helping them to grow up loving their king and obeying his commandments? Or are you giving the nod? Most of Ephraim I know, again, to speak the truth in love, but how do you break through to a people that's committing slow suicide? Most of Ephraim's like, I don't have time or money for my king. And it doesn't matter because he knows my heart. If you were Yahweh, and here you have, on the one hand, you have people like King David, Shaliach Shaul, dedicated servants like that. And then on the other hand, you have, I did what I want. He knows my heart. What's going to happen in the day of reckoning? What's going to happen in the day of recompense? We're going to get King Kong. That's what's going to happen in the day of recompense. Verse 19, after a long time, like 2,000 years, the Adon of those servants came and settled accounts with them. We're talking about the day of judgment. Verse 20, so he who had received 5 talents came and brought 5 other talents, saying, Adon, you delivered to me 5 talents. Look, I was busy. I worked for you. I did something for you because I care about you. I love you. I want to spend my life working for you. I want to help you any way I can. Or if I have a job, I want to rearrange my life to help you as much as I can. Look, I've gained 5 more talents besides the ones you gave me. Verse 21, his Adon said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You worked for me. You disciplined yourself to do what it takes to expand my holdings. You were faithful to me with the saved life that I gave you. Therefore, I will make you a ruler over many things because you showed me that you care more about me as your king than you do about your own pleasures in the world. Therefore, since you chose me over pleasures in the world, over wasted time, dissipation time in the world, therefore, enter into the joy of your Adon. Approved. Verse 22. He also, who had received 2 talents, came and said, Adon, you judged me to be worthy to give 2 talents. You delivered me 2 talents, and look, I've gained 2 more talents besides them. Adon said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. Maybe you didn't have quite as much ability as the first guy, but you still did all that you could with it. Okay, what I gave to you to invest for me, you invested it to the best of your ability. So even though it's less than the brother with 5, you've been faithful. You've been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things, not because of the amount, but because you were faithful to me with what you had instead of enjoying the pleasures of unrighteousness. Therefore, enter into the joy of your Adon. Verse 24. Then he who had received only one talent, meaning his own salvation in the spirit, came and said, Adon, I knew you to be a hard man. You reap where you have not sown, and you gather where you have not scattered seed. You're Jewish, you're aggressive, you push forward toward establishing a worldwide kingdom for your father. You're aggressive with that. Verse 25, and I was afraid, and I went and hid my life. I hid my saved life in the ground. So, I think really I just need to read my Bible to prepare for a pop quiz. I'm just going to learn a bunch of things. I'm going to listen to a bunch of free videos. I'm going to read a bunch of stuff I can find online for free. I'm going to eat lunch in my friend's living room because these things are free and easy and they don't require any lifetime commitment like what you're talking about in your book. Like you're talking about, like, you want me to steward my whole life to do my very best for you and your community and your people and help establish the kind of a world that you always wanted. Look, it's too much. Okay. You gave me one saved life. You gave me, you know, I'm bringing this back to you. Okay. This is what you entrusted to me. I'm bringing it back. I have a saved life. Here I am. Okay. So now what you have, what is yours? You gave me saved life. Here I am. Aren't you happy with me? Verse 26. But his Adon answered and said to him, You wicked and lazy Ephraimite. You knew that I'm Jewish. You knew I'm aggressive. And you knew I'm here to do all I can to establish the kingdom for my father. You knew that's first and foremost for me. You knew that my father is the greatest war Elohim ever. And you know that because of that, I'm going to push into the kingdom like no one else's business. You knew that my preference is to reap where I have not sown. You knew that I would want to gather where I have not even scattered seed. Did you think about my preferences? Did you think about me? Did you think about what I wanted? You want to be my bridal candidate. You want to be my assistant. Did you even think about my preferences? Did you even think about the way I like to do things? Did you read my book? And did you take it to heart? Did you say, "Oh, a Beit Din model. How are we going to incorporate that in our lives? Oh, fivefold unity on a single foundation. How can we do that for Yeshua?" Verse 27. Why did you not at least take the saved life that I gave you and deposit it with one of the apostles or deposit it with one of the prophets or the elders so that you could help them in doing what they're doing for me? Why did you not help them in what they're doing for me? Did you think about what I wanted here at all? Did you think at all about what my father wants me to do for him and your role in that as a Proverbs 31 bridal candidate? Or did you just think about what you wanted? But why did you not deposit my money at least with the bankers, meaning with a congregational deacon or an elder, so that at my coming I could at least have received interest? I gave you something to invest. I could have at least received some interest on it because you're helping someone who's organizing to help me. Why did you not do that? Okay. Is it because that's it? You don't really even think about what I want, do you? You don't try to help me get what I want because you don't even think about what I want. You only think about what you want, even though I have the power of life and death over you. Isn't that the case? And you've forgotten what kingship is all about. You've forgotten that in order to be worthy in a kingship model, you have to love the king more than your own life. And if you don't love the king more than your own life, you're suspect or you're worthy of death. Verse 28. So he said to the others, Take the talent from the lazy, self-serving Ephraimite who's only focused on what he wants. Okay, Judah, this is equal opportunity. Take it from the selfish, lazy servant who's only focused on getting what he wants and give it to him who has the 10 talents. Because if I give something to the man who's busy for me, who develops his skills to help me, if I give the money, if I give the investment to him, he will see to it that I get a good return on my investment because he cares about me getting what I want. Verse 29, for to everyone who has genuine love and respect for me and believes my word, more will be given, and he will have in great abundance. But from him who does not have genuine love or caring or respect for me, even what he has will be taken away. And will judge it by the fruit. Verse 30, and cast the unprofitable servant into the outer darkness, because he called himself my disciple, but he seemed completely unwilling to discipline himself for me. He didn't seem interested that I could get what my father sent me to accomplish. And among the house of Ephraim, there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth because they thought they could chump me. They thought that they could do nothing for me in my name and not even help those who are working for me. And they thought everything would be just fine. That just shows me there's no respect. There's no genuine love there. Shows me I'm dealing with a phony and a fake who thinks he loves me. He's just going to call on my name. He's not going to do what I said. The fruit says otherwise. And he says, oh, he knows my heart. Yeah, I know your heart. Your fruit tells me all about your heart, or your lack thereof. And brothers, sisters, it's a necessary thing for us to tell ourselves the truth, to be honest with ourselves. We shouldn't wait till the day of judgment and then realize, oh, I mean, we were supposed to be investing our mina for him. I mean, we were supposed to be helping the deacons and the elders according to a fivefold unity, according to his word, and not just picking and choosing the easy parts, not just picking and choosing the parts that we like, so that we're effectively doing what seems good and right in our own eyes in his name. How many how many of us in the house of Ephraim does this honestly describe? Our prayer is that you become one of the future 10% to whom this will not apply and for whom this will one day not describe. These are hard words. These are words of requirement for what Yeshua expects for those who want him to intervene and intercede for them in that day. So our prayers are with you that you will be part of the future 10%, meaning you will make the most important decision of your life, which is to do whatever it takes that you need to do to put him first in all ways so that you might be among the future 10%. And if your name is Levi or Judah, we pray that you will please abandon the condemned split level Talmudic apartment. Okay. It's not okay to say, I keep Torah and then you keep Talmud. Those are not the same thing. The Talmud has a completely different prophetic trajectory than the Tanakh. So, what you need to do, brothers, in order to not be deceitful, dishonest, schizophrenic, or perhaps for many, double minded, is that you need to return, same as Ephraim, you need to return your loyalties back to Elohim. That includes keeping the words of Mashiach Nagid. And they're hard words, but they're words of spirit and truth and life. And if we know what the future holds, let's be real about it. Let's not live in Disneyland. Let's not live in a split level apartment. Let's not live in a split level head. If we claim to love Yeshua, then we need to act like it, not like a bunch of crazy people that think it's okay to say one thing and do another. We need to act like a bunch of crazy people that think the hypocrisy is going to be smiled upon in that day. Because Ephraim, brothers, we're supposed to be doubly fruitful. We're not supposed to be doubly minded. Please pray with me that our people of both houses, Judah and Joseph, will develop this love for Mashiach Nagid of Daniel 9 and verse 26. Shabbat Shalom.